Hello and welcome to Stories Behind the Songs. In each episode, I tell the backstory behind a famous rock or pop song. Today's song is You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet by Bachman-Turner Overdrive. You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet is one of the great examples of a mistake song. It was never supposed to be released as a single. It was never supposed to be on an album. It was never supposed to be anything, but it became a worldwide smash and a song that has endured to this day. Well then, how did it come to be? The birth of You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet followed the birth of Bachman-Turner Overdrive, which followed the death of the golden lineup of the Guess Who during their incredible run of success in 1969 and 1970. After Randy Bachman was simultaneously fired and quit from the Guess Who in May of 1970, he was cast free to try and make his mark on his own. It took a few years, but Randy was able to get that rarest of things in show business, a second act. And that second act started in Winnipeg, Canada. After being cast out of the Guess Who, Randy Bachman returns to his hometown of Winnipeg to lick his chops and contemplate what in the world to do next. He was a founding member of the Guess Who, which had risen from nothing to being international superstars, and just as they reach their zenith, he's out of the band. Back in Winnipeg, he feels he's branded a loser and a lunatic for leaving the Guess Who. Nobody wants to work with him, so what does he do? He turns to his family. He has 3 younger brothers, and they wind up getting involved in this next project. Robbie Bachman joins on drums. Tim Bachman comes along a bit later to play guitar, and Gary Bachman becomes the manager. For singing duties, he reunites with none other than Guess Who founder and lead singer Chad Allen. This band is Christian Bravebelt, and in 1971 they release an album of country/folk rock songs that actually is a precursor to what later country rock bands like the Eagles and Poco would do. The problem with the album, though, is simple. Nobody buys it. So Randy Bachman decides to tinker with the band a little bit. Said Randy, "Neil Young and my brother Gary said we really needed a strong lead singer. Why not look at Fred Turner? He had this huge, what we call Harley Davidson voice, a John Fogerty kind of thing." Equally importantly, Fred Turner was married, didn't do drugs, and was a settled working musician which fit in perfectly with Randy's clean lifestyle. Fred Turner joins Bravebelt full-time for its second album, which makes the album a weird mix of mellower country rock songs and more freewheeling rock and roll. His presence makes it a stepping stone to the sound that would become Bachman-Turner Overdrive. That second album, however, also sells very little. But then one of those fortuitous events occurs. Bravebelt are booked to play a university show in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Chad Allen has left the band the week before, and the promoter decides to sack Bravebelt and bring in a more rockin' band. But when that band falls through, he begs Bravebelt to stick around and asks them to play a set of classic rock covers. And they decide to do it. They run through some of the contemporary greats like Proud Mary, Brown Sugar, and All Right Now. The band rocks it out, the dance floor fills up, and a new band is born. We instantly saw the difference between playing sit-down music people could talk over and playing music they would jump out of their seats and dance to, Bachman said. With this instant metamorphosis, they released the Bachman-Turner Overdrive debut album in May 1973. This is also around the point where Randy Bachman, for the first time, takes on some lead singing duties. Fred Turner says it took a little urging to get Randy to sing for the group. He recalls, "Randy didn't really want to sing at all, and I said to him, you know, your songs, you have a certain feel for those songs that I don't have, and it would probably be better if you tried to do the vocals on them." And from that point on, he and Fred Turner would share lead singing duties for the band. The album Bachman-Turner Overdrive 2 follows just 7 months later and delivers 2 songs, Let It Ride and Taking Care of Business, which put them on the hit-making machine map. Taking Care of Business just misses cracking the top 10 in the US and goes all the way to number 3 in Canada. After hitting the road 3 months straight to continue their relentless touring schedule, the band comes in for a landing in Seattle, Washington to record their 3rd album, which will be titled Not Fragile. The title is a tongue-in-cheek response to the band Yes and their album Fragile. Fragile by Yes was very much an art rock and carefully produced album. In Randy Bachman and Fred Turner's eyes, BTO is the opposite. Freewheeling, spontaneous, and pure rock and roll. In Seattle, they start recording the album, which is where the grand mistake happens. As they work in the studio, Randy Bachman writes a song to use to test out the recording equipment, like the microphones. And for the rhythm of this song, he takes inspiration from a couple of contemporary rock and rollers.
Only you know and I know all the love that we've
out of that inspiration comes this. I copped those jangling rhythms, changed the chords, and then added some power chords of my own, Bachman explains. I had a work in progress in 2 parts, a great rhythm and a heavy riff. Next, as a joke, he decides to put some words to it and record it for his brother Gary, who has a stutter. As Randy said, the words just flowed out without a thought. I met a devil woman and she took my heart away. That sounded good. Then for the chorus, I copied the way he'd say, "You ain't seen nothing yet," and also the way he stumbled on forget, and the way he said baby. I liked it as an idea, but I was never going to finish it off. I sang the storyline off the cuff. My first wife used to say to me, "You ain't seen nothing yet." When I sang "She Had It Coming to Me" and I wanted it that way, I was riffing. He also said, we thought just for fun, we'd take this song and I'd stutter and we'd send it to him. He'll have the only copy in the world of this song by BTO. Where history takes another left turn is when Mercury Records senior VP Charlie Fash flies into Seattle to hear what the band has put together. He listens to the 8 songs they've recorded for Not Fragile. He likes the record, but there's a problem. He doesn't hear a single. So he says, "You got any other songs?" Randy Bachman says, "No, these are the 8 songs and that's it. Album's done. But we do have this one test song." So the engineer plays it for him. As soon as Charlie Fash hears the opening rhythm, his eyes light up and he says, "That's our hit song." Now Fash decides it needs to be on the album, but Randy Bachman is in complete disagreement. They'd been on the road for 90 days. They have a 3-week break to do the album and see their families. There's no time to make changes. But Fash eventually gets him to agree to put "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet" on the album, but with the agreement that it won't be released as a single. First, though, Randy Bachman doesn't want the stutters on the record, so he re-records the vocals, but it doesn't work. He said, "I tried to sing it, but I sounded like Frank Sinatra. It didn't fit." At Charlie Fash's urging, they go with the original version that includes the stuttering, and without even remixing the song to fix the out-of-tune guitars. You can guess what happens next. The album's released and it starts to sell. And a big reason is rock stations are playing "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet." Charlie Fash calls up Randy, gives him the sales numbers, and pleads with him to release it as a single. But Randy says, "No way." Next week, same thing. Randy says, "No can do." As he said, "I started to hear it getting played and I was embarrassed. I turned the radio down. My wife would say to me, 'Look, at last they're playing a song of yours like mad.' I was producer, so I had final say on what went out. I woke up one day and asked myself, why am I stopping this? So I said to Charlie, okay, release it. I bet it does nothing." And of course, it doesn't do nothing. It enters the Billboard charts on September 15th, 1974, and 6 weeks later, it's #1. It goes to #1 in the US, in Canada, Denmark, Germany, South Africa, and 17 other countries. A moment when Randy Bachman realized the power of "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet" was when they started doing it live. As he said, once it starts, it takes over. It's got that galloping horse rhythm, a trick that makes you move. It's 4 on the floor, a dance beat with a galloping triplet snare. And then in the middle, this hypnotic cowbell comes in, which is stolen from Free's "All Right Now." But just like Randy's accident song "American Woman with the Guess Who," the accident song "You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet" would be the pinnacle for Bachman-Turner Overdrive. The following year, they released "Four-Wheel Drive" that has just one minor hit. That was Randy Bachman's "Hey You," a shot across the bow at Burton Cummings that goes to #21. After that, the band releases 2 more albums, but sales are increasingly disappointing. In 1977, the other guys tell Randy they're not happy with the direction of the music and the pace he's taking the band on. And incredibly, once again, Randy Bachman is out of the band he took to the top. But at least this time it was his decision. The remainder of the band hangs in there and does a couple of albums without him, but without Randy, the magic is gone. Then in 1984, in one final hurrah, Randy Bachman reteams up with Fred Turner for a BTO album, and that would be it for the band. And with that, the saga of the Great Mistake song of 1974 comes to an end. Here are some other interesting facts about You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet by Bachman-Turner Overdrive. Randy Bachman's brother Gary, who the song was solely intended for, loved the song. By the time it was recorded, though, he'd overcome the stutter, was no longer the band's manager, and was a successful businessman in Canada. In his youth, he had serious health issues, and Randy Bachman has talked about how he literally carried Gary to school on his back. Years after You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet shot to the top of the charts, Randy Bachman received an award from the American Stuttering Association for the best stuttering song of all time. You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet beat out songs including My Generation and Benny and the Jets. Randy Bachman once was on a plane, and the guy next to him was calling his girlfriend, and he kept on saying Yasny. Randy asked him, "What does that mean?" And he says, "You ain't seen nothing yet, man, like that song." Shortly before You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet hit number 1, Nothing from Nothing by Billy Preston was at the top. Then You Haven't Done Nothing by Stevie Wonder goes to number 1, which is followed by You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. It's one of those magical grammatical rhythms I've seen on the Billboard charts for years. For example, in 1973, The Morning After was succeeded at number 1 by Touch Me in the Morning. In 1974, Rock the Boat was replaced at number 1 by Rock Your Baby. And in 1979, Bad Girls is followed by Good Times. When Burton Cummings heard You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet for the first time on the radio, he called up Randy Bachman and told him, "Son of a gun, you did it again." Shortly after, he left the Guess Who and released his own album that had the hit song Stand Tall and a slowed-down, jazzy version of You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. Randy Bachman has a son who had a one-hit wonder in the 1990s. His name is Tal Bachman, and his hit was called She's So High. It peaked at number 3 in Canada and number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100. Randy Bachman is one of 2 artists to have a number 1 song with 2 separate bands. The other? Paul McCartney. There are 2 great ironies regarding Bachman-Turner Overdrive and You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. Number 1 is the irony of Randy Bachman being a guy that avoided the rock and roll lifestyle like it was the plague, but when it came to music, he was at heart a hard-driving rock and roller. In contrast, his songwriting partner in the Guess Who, Burton Cummings, who was really into the rock and roll lifestyle, wasn't the big rock and roller. After Randy Bachman is booted out of the Guess Who, Burton Cummings gradually takes the band in a milder direction. His musical style is really more like an Elton John or a Billy Joel. Piano-based songs with nice melodies and the occasional rocker thrown in. The other irony is that Randy was the straight-laced Mormon who wouldn't allow drinking, smoking, or womanizing by the band when they were on the road. Yet his biggest song with BTO seemingly has all this sexual innuendo in it, as evidenced by lines like, "I'm gonna give you some lovin' you're never gonna forget." He's always said the lyrics were just riffing and didn't have much meaning, but perhaps there's some subconscious work at play there. Randy Bachman has said You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet changed his outlook on life. It taught him that if something happens by mistake, embrace it. Everything happens for a reason. If you get a flat tire or if you get lost, go along for the ride and see where it takes you. That wraps up the story of You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet by Bachman-Turner Overdrive. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll be back soon with another story behind a great rock and roll song.